future president.
Hey everybody, so you're going to be hearing the impeachment trial
there is nothing more important to Donald
throughout the
Trump
course of
than protecting the office of the presidency for future presidents.
me playing today.
And I suppose when he withheld military aid from Ukraine, he was trying to protect future presidents.
But that's because
And when he sought
it's
to
important
force
and I'm not wanting to miss any more of it. And there are 2 hours until the trial resumes, so right now I'm listening to the closing arguments from Schiff's part
I don't think that argument goes very far.
of presenting the evidence.
But I expect you'll hear it. I expect you'll hear it. You may hear an argument that the president was really concerned about corruption. And he was concerned about burden sharing. I won't spend much time on that because you've heard the evidence on that. There is no indication that this had anything to do with corruption, and every bit of evidence that it had nothing to do with fighting corruption or burden sharing. Indeed, nothing about the burden changed between the time he froze the aid and the time he released the aid. There was no new effort to get others to contribute more, and Europe contributes a great deal as it is. This is an after-the-fact rationalization. You probably saw the public reporting that there was an exhaustive effort after the fact to come up with a post hoc rationalization for this scheme. I would like to show you the product of that investigation.
It's going to be a long, hungry night.
But I'll need your help.
These people need food.
Because it is among the
There are
documents
rams out in the hills.
they refuse to turn
Good
over.
eating, cooked easy.
They will show you
No
just what
lords
an
around to kill you for poaching.
after-the-fact
Too dangerous to go hunting down.
invention
More likely
this
to find
argument
mages
is.
than luck. Good luck.
Now,
Luck won't
I
work
expect
fast.
you'll hear the argument, Obama did it. Obama did it. Now, that may take several different forms, but the form of Obama did it that I'm referring to is Obama also withheld aid. Honestly, I think that argument is an insult to our intelligence.
Welcome back.
Because
You
the
there?
argument is
Can you help my
Obama
wife?
withheld aid
Please,
from
I beg
Egypt.
you.
And he made a
What's wrong with
condition
your
with
wife?
it.
She gets sick when the weather's
Obama
foul.
withheld aid from
Can't catch her
Egypt
breath
after
like
they had a
cobwebs in her
revolution.
lungs. Our son Hindle
And
makes a potion
circumstances
that lets
change,
her
and you
breathe.
know something? He
He's
didn't
the only
hide
one
it
who
from
can make it,
Congress.
but
In
he's
fact,
joined that
Congress
cult in the
supported it.
hills. Please, get to him and
And
tell him
yes,
what's wrong.
there are
Without that
times
potion,
when we
she'll
withhold
die.
aid for a good policy reason, not a corrupt effort to get help in your election. The American people know the difference between right and wrong. They can recognize the difference between aid that is withheld for a malicious purpose and aid that is held in the best interests of our national security. But you'll hear the Obama did it argument. You will hear the call was perfect. You'll hear the call was perfect. Now, I suspect the reason they will make the argument the call was perfect is because the president insists that they do. I don't think they really want to have to make that argument. You wouldn't either.
Sure.
But they have a client to represent, and so they will make the argument the call was perfect. And they will also make the argument Ukraine thinks the call was perfect. Ukraine says there was no pressure.
You're with the Inquisition. Corporal Vale.
What that
Thanks for
really
your help.
means is
The Majors and Templars don't
Ukraine
seem to
wants
care
a
who gets
future.
caught in their war.
Ukraine
Refugees
knows
here
it's
in
still
dire need of
beholden
help.
to us for
The
aid.
war doesn't kill them.
Ukraine
Cold
still
or
hasn't gotten
starvation
in
will.
through the door of the White House. Ukraine
What
knows
other
that if
problems do these
they
refugees face?
acknowledge
We've
that
got
they
some
were
injuries
shaken
that go
down by the
beyond
President of the
stitches and
United
elf
States,
I know
the
healers are
President of
in
the
short
United States
supply.
will make
But if you can
them
find someone in
pay.
Redcliffe to help us, it would save a lot
So
of
when you
lives.
hear them say Ukraine
You
felt no
concerned
pressure,
about
and their
refugees
proof
starving?
is
Yes.
because
Many
the
of them brought
Ukraine
food.
president
They
doesn't want
expected
to
to be
call the
home by
President of the
now.
United States
Or safe in a city.
a
There's a
bad
hunter
name.
up the hill who had some
You'll
ideas.
know why. Because they need America.
Is there anything we can do to help people deal with
Need
the cold?
America.
I asked the Inquisition to send blankets.
The
You'd think I was
framers
asking for a wagon
did
of more
not
Lyrians. A recruit named Whittle is trying to make what we can bring
you
in
to
last.
leave your common
If you have any
sense
ideas,
at the
talk to
door.
them across the road.
Now, You'll also hear the
Can you
defense.
tell me about the Templars?
The president said there was no quid pro quo. The president said there was no quid pro quo.
Now they're killing rebel mages.
I guess that's
With any
the end of the
refugees
story.
they think are mage sympathizers.
This is a
Every Templar I've ever known has
well-known
wanted to
principle
protect
of
the
criminal
common folk.
law that if the
These men
defendant
defile their
says he
rules
didn't do it,
today.
he couldn't have done it.
What can you tell me about the rebel mages?
If
real
the
rebels are
defendant
adopted
learns that he's been
Dug
caught
in
and he
and
says he
taking care
didn't
of their
do it,
own.
he
The
couldn't have
ones
done
out
it.
here are just apostates, locked up in the circles all these years.
That doesn't hold
and
up
now
in any
they've
court
gone
now.
mad with power. The rebels
It
of
shouldn't hold
Redcliffe
up
have
here.
washed their hands of them. I wish we could do the
You also
same.
hear a variation of the argument, no harm, no foul.
What can you tell me about the man who's supposed to be getting
They got the
horses
money.
for the Inquisition?
They got the
Horse
money.
Master Dennett.
And they got
He
the
lives
meeting
on a
even though
farm
they
to the
didn't.
west. Tough old
They
fella.
got the meeting on the
We haven't heard
sideline
from
of the UN.
Best we can
Kind
tell,
of a
these old
drive-by,
Uncles
but they
mages
got a
and
meeting.
Templars are done killing each other.
No harm, no foul, right?
Farewell.
A meeting on the sidelines is pretty much the same thing, right, as a head of state meeting in Oval Office? Of course it's not. Why do you think at that meeting at the United Nations, the president of Ukraine was still saying, hey, when am I going to get to come to town? He certainly recognizes the difference, and we should too. What's more, there's every bit of harm and every bit of foul in withholding aid from an ally at war and releasing it only when you're caught. Russia knows now about the wedge in our relations with Ukraine. The moment Russia found out about this, and I have to imagine, given how good their intel services are, they did not have to wait for Politico to break the story any more than Ukraine did.
Who placed a skull out here? And for
In
what
fact, with
purpose?
so deep a penetration of Ukraine, I would have to expect the Russians would have found out at least as early as the Ukrainians did. Not
The
really.
skull illuminates certain objects in the distance. I am not familiar
The
with such
moment
magic.
Ukraine
Of
learned
course,
and Russia
had to be
learned,
a skull
there was
like
harm.
some creepy shit.
Because Ukraine knew they couldn't trust us. Russia knew they could take advantage of us. There was immediately.
Okay.
And because someone is caught, because a scheme is thwarted, doesn't make that scheme any less criminal and corrupt.
We could make camp here?
You get no pass when you get caught. Now expect one of the princes you'll see is they will play you
Nothing to report, sir.
certain testimony from the House, where my colleagues on the other side of the aisle ask questions like, did the president ever say he was bribing Ukraine? Did you ever see him actually bribe Ukraine? Did you hear him say that he was going to bribe Ukraine? Did you personally see this yourself? And if you didn't see it, if he didn't lay it out for you, then it couldn't happen. 2 plus 2 does not equal 4. You are not allowed to consider anything except for a televised confession by the president. And even then, don't consider it. So I imagine you'll hear some of that testimony where witnesses are asked, they work for the Defense Department. Well, did the president ever tell you that he was conditioning? Never mind if these are people who don't necessarily even talk to the president. But I expect you'll see some of that. As I mentioned before, you hear the defense. We claim privilege. You can't impeach the president over the exercise of privilege. Never mind the fact that they never claimed privilege. They never asserted privilege. And you know why? You know why they never actually invoked privilege in the House? It's because they know that if they did, they'd have to produce the documents and they'd have to show what they were redacting, and they didn't want to do even that. They knew the overwhelming majority of the documents and witness testimony,
Look at
there
this.
was no even
The
tolerable
apostates
claim
have
of
gone
privilege.
mad with power.
I see
So
just
they
as many
didn't want to even
Templars.
invoke it. all they would say is, maybe someday. But you will hear that can't be impeached or claim privilege they never made. So what do all these defenses mean? What do they mean? What do they mean collectively when you add them all up? What they mean is, under Article 2, the President can do whatever he wants. That's really it. That's really it. Stripped of all the detail and all the history on
We
it.
must continue on if
What
we
they
are
want
to
us to
secure the
believe
alliance.
is the President can do whatever he wants under Article 2, and there is nothing that you or the House can do about it. Robert Kennedy once said, "Moral courage is a rarer commodity than bravery in battle, or great integrity. Yet it is the one essential, vital quality for those who seek to change the world which yields most painfully to change. Moral courage is a rarer commodity than bravery in battle." I have to say, when I first read that, I wasn't sure I agreed. Moral courage is a rarer quality than courage in battle. Just doesn't seem right. I wasn't sure I really agreed, and for a Democrat not to agree with a Kennedy is kind of a heresy. I'm sure some of my GOP colleagues feel the same way about the Kennedys and me. After all, what could be more brave than courage in battle? What could be more rare than courage in battle? But then I got to visit, as I know all of you have, our service members around the world, and see just how blessed we are with an abundance of heroes by the millions who have joined the service of this country. Service members who every day demonstrate the most incredible bravery. I just have the greatest respect for them. For people like Jason Soul, John McCain, Daniel Inouye, and so many others who served in this body and the other, and who've never served in office, by the millions all around the country and all around the world. It's incredible respect. It's an amazing thing how common is their uncommon bravery. My father's 92, probably watching, part of the greatest generation. Left high school early to join the service. He tried to enlist in the Marine Corps. He failed the physical. At the end of World War II, failed the physical. Bad eyesight and flat feet, which was apparently enough to fail the physical. So 2 weeks later, he went to try to enlist in the Army, thinking that maybe it's a different physical standard, and even if it isn't, maybe I'll get a different examining position. Turns out, same standard, same position. And he recognized my father. And he said, "Weren't you here 2 weeks ago?" And my father said, "Yeah." And he said, "You really want to get in that bad?" And my father said, "Yeah." And he was in there. Now the war was over, and so he never left the United States. And when he left the service, he went to the University of Alabama. And about midway through, he wanted to get on with his life, and he left college. Right into the business. Something he always was doing. Leaving college. But I think in a way, he got a better shape now.
I think it's time you stopped playing the wounded party with me, Varric.
Ignoring the times you actually wounded me.
I did no such thing. I questioned you and then brought you to Haven so you...
Served in the military and also went to school. That's the best they
Tell your story to the
And I
divine.
think there's certain things you can
What
only learn.
then? Thanks, Varric. We believe you. See you around.
Certainly,
Do not
can't
pretend to
really
be
learn
an
anything about
innocent
war
bystander. I could have done far worse, with full justification.
Yes. Thank you
and
for not
maybe there are
torturing
things you
me.
can't learn
I'm
about
so
life.
much happier now.
So those of you that have served have the most complete education I think there is. But even so, it's more of a concept. Really more real. And that on top. And then I saw what Robert Kennedy meant by moral courage. Few, he said, are willing to brave the disapproval of their fellows, the censure of their colleagues, and the wrath of their society. And then I understood by that measure just how rare moral courage is. How many of us are willing to brave the disapproval of our fellows, the censure of our colleagues, and the wrath of our society. Just as those who have served in uniform can't fully understand, those who have not served in uniform can fully understand what military service means, so too there is a different kind of fraternity and sorority among those who serve in Congress. I always tell my constituents there are two kinds of jobs in Congress.
No normal
And
wolf
it's not
would fight
Democrats
with
and
such
Republicans.
determination.
It's those
The
from a
breach may
safe
have driven
seat
them
and those
mad,
from an unsafe
or perhaps a
seat.
demon took command of the pack.
And I'm sure the same is true of those from a safe state and an unsafe state. It's why I think there's a certain chemistry between members who represent those swing districts and states, because they can step into each other's shoes. And one of the things that we in this fellowship of office holders understand that most people don't is that real political courage doesn't come from disagreeing with our opponents, but from disagreeing with our friends and with our own party. Because it means having to stare down accusations of disloyalty and disgrace. He's a Democrat in name only, or she's a Republican in name only. What I said last night, if it resonated with anyone in this chamber, didn't account for it. My views, as heartfelt as they are, reflect the views of my constituents. But what happens when our heartfelt views of right and wrong are in conflict with the popular opinion of our constituents? What happens when our devotion to our oaths, to our values, to our love of country, apart from the momentary passion of a large number of people back home? Those are the times that try our souls.
You should revive them.
CBS News reported last night that a Trump confidant said that GOP senators were warned, vote against your president, vote against the president, and your head will be on a pike.
Yep, he said that.
Now, I don't know if that's true. Vote
This
against
would be a good
the
place to
president
set
and your
up
head will be on
camp.
a pike. I have to say, when I read that, and again, I don't know if that's true, but when I read that, I was struck by the irony. By the irony. I hope it's not true. I hope it's not true. But I was struck by the irony.
So what I'm
of the
doing is I'm
idea
setting up basically a quick travel network throughout the hinterlands.
when we're
right
talking
now.
about
I'm trying to get as many
a president
forward
who would make
camps
himself a monarch,
placed at once,
that whoever that
so
was
that I
would
can
use
do
the
all of the
terminology
quests
of a penalty that was imposed by
quickly.
a monarch. A head on a pike. Just this week, America lost a hero, Thomas Wheelstone. He passed away on Monday, the day before it stabbed again. Some of you may have known that he was served as Congressman Thomas Wheelstone, who was a Republican from Illinois, and the second-ranking member on the House Judiciary Committee, and that committee was conducting a impeachment inquiry into President Nixon. In July of 1974, as the inquiry was coming to a close, Congressman Wheelstone began meeting with a bipartisan group of members of the House, 3 other Republicans and 3 Democrats. Here in the Senate, they might have called them the Gang of 7. They gathered, they talked, and they labored over language and ultimately helped develop a bipartisan support for the articles that led a group of Republican senators, including Barry Goldwater and Howard Baker, to tell President Nixon that he must resign.
The
Some say that
apostates
the
have
Nixon
fled to the
impeachment
hills.
might not have moved forward were it not for those 4 courageous Republicans led by Congressman Railsback. And it pained the congressman because he credited Nixon with giving him his seat, with getting him elected. He did it because he said,
The area ahead is well
because
defended.
seeing all the evidence, it was something we had to do because the evidence was there. One of his aides later heard, eulogized him, saying he felt an obligation to the Constitution to do what is right. Now soon, members of his body face the most momentous of decisions. Not, as I said at the outset, between guilt and innocence, but a far more foundational issue. Should there be a fair trial? Shall the House be able to present its case with witnesses and documents through the use of subpoenas as has been the case in every impeachment trial in history?
I just realized there's a bear in
The
this
President's lawyers have been making their case
rude.
outside the chamber, threatening to stall these proceedings with the assertion of false claims of privilege. Having persuaded this body to postpone consideration of the witnesses and documents, they now appear to be preparing the ground to say it will be too late to consider them next week. But consider this. The hundreds of documents that we have subpoenaed, there is no colorable claim and none has been asserted. To the degree that the claim has been asserted. To the degree that even superficially a claim would occur, does not feel its time. More, to the degree that there were disputes over whether a privilege applied, we have a perfectly good judge sitting behind us, empowered by the rules of this body to resolve those disputes. And then the Chief Justice decides where a narrow application of privilege ought to apply, you will still have the power to overrule. How often do you get the chance to overrule a Chief Justice of the Supreme Court? You have to admit it's every legislator's dream. So let us not be fooled by the argument that it will take too long, or persuaded that the trial must be over before the State of the Union. This is no parking ticket we are contesting, no shoplifting case we are prosecuting. It is a matter of high crimes and misdemeanors. How long is too long to have a fair trial, fair to the president and fair to the American people? The American people do not agree on much, but they will not forgive when deprived of the truth, and certainly not because it took a backseat to speech. In his pamphlet of 1777, The American Crisis, Thomas Paine wrote, "Those who expect to reap the blessings of freedom must undergo the fatigue of supporting." There's too much fatigue to call witnesses and have a fair trial. Are the blessings of freedom so meager that we will not endure the fatigue of a real trial with witnesses and documents? President Lincoln, in his closing message to Congress in December 1862, said this: "Fellow citizens, we cannot escape history. We of this Congress and this administration will be remembered in spite of ourselves. No personal significance or insignificance can spare one or another of us. The fiery trial through which we pass will light us down in honor or dishonor to the latest generation." I think he was the most interesting president in history. He may be the most interesting person in history. This man who started out dirt poor. Dirt poor, like hundreds of thousands of other people at the time. He had nothing. No money, no education. He educated himself. But he had a brain in that head, a brilliance in that mind, that made him one of the most incredible, not just presidents, but people in history. I think he's the most interesting character in our history. Out of the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of other Americans at the time, why him? Why him? I think a lot about history, as I know you do. Sometimes I think about how unforgiving history can be of our conduct. We can do a lifetime's work, draft the most wonderful legislation, help our constituents, and yet we may be remembered for none of it. After a single decision, we may be remembered. That's in the first of our people. I believe this may be one of those moments. A moment we never thought we would.
I doubt that's the last of them.
A moment when our democracy was gravely threatened, and not from without, but from within. Russia, too, has a constitution. It's not a bad constitution. It's just a meaningless one. In Russia, they're trial by telephone. They have the same hopefully like we do to a trial. They'll hear evidence and witnesses. But before the verdict is rendered, the judge picks up the telephone and calls the right person to find out how it's supposed to turn out. Trial by telephone. Is that what we have here? Trial by telephone? Someone on the other end of the phone dictating what this trial should look like. The founders gave us more than words. They gave us inspiration. They may have receded into mythology, but they inspire us still. And more than us, they inspire the rest of the world. They inspire the rest of the world. From their prison cells in Turkey, journalists look to us. From their internment camps in China, they look to us. From their cells in Egypt, those who gathered in Tahrir Square for a better life look to us. From the Philippines, those that were the victims and their families of mass execution killings, they look to us. From Elgin prison, they look to us. From all over the world, they look to us. And increasingly, they don't recognize what they do. It's a terrible tragedy for them. It is a worse tragedy for us. Because there's nowhere else for them to turn. They're not going to turn to Russia. They're not going to turn to China. They're not going to turn to Europe with all of its problems. They look to us because we are still an indivisible nation. They look to us because we have a rule of law. They look to us because no one is above that law. And one of the things that separates us from those people in Elgin prison is the right to a trial. It's a right to a trial. Americans get a fair trial. And so I ask you, I implore you, give America a fair trial. Give America a fair trial.
Yeah, I mean, if they really care about being Americans,
thank you,
then yes. Yes, they would allow witnesses. Yes, they would allow evidence. Yes, they would allow testimony. Okay, I've triggered a revive on everyone. Just gotta remember, there are bears here. Bear! Bear! Shit.
Solus needs help.
Bear, bear. You wary, wary bear. Wary bear. Ah. Okay. Am I far enough away from the bears? Huh. Ah, shit. Fuck is all I can say. Fuck. I will establish a camp. I will, and I don't care if I get attacked or mauled by bears. Over and over and over again. I don't care if I meet a grisly end. Grizzly!
We could
Behind
make
me.
camp here.
There are 3 of them right there.
Office and debase the public discourse.
Just so I'm clear, you mean a threat to your presidency?
I think it's intended to be personally threatening. I think that could.
The New York Times is reporting that John Bolton, former National Security Advisor, heard President Trump say that he was withholding military aid to Ukraine until they helped the investigation into Democrats. The Times cites sources who saw a draft of the manuscript of Bolton's upcoming book. Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff, who leads impeachment manager. Chairmanship, thank you very much for being here. It's an important day, obviously, for you and everyone. How do these revelations of what you've just heard from the New York Times reporting change the Senate trial?
Well, I think very dramatically, but first I should say there is already direct evidence that this link between the $291 million of aid, military aid to Ukraine, and the president demanding that these critical investigations get done. Mick Mulvaney himself admitted that was the case. Gordon Sondland also already testified that he talked to the president, and while the president denied a quid pro quo during the same conversation, he said, but Zelensky has to go to the mic and essentially announce these investigations. But this would be another witness that would corroborate in very direct terms if this report is accurate that the president told him unequivocally he was holding up the money until Ukraine did these investigations. It completely blasts another hole in the president's defense. And I think for the senators, and I'm not just talking about the 4 that have been so much the focus of attention, for every senator, Democrat and Republican, I don't know how you can explain that you wanted a search for the truth in this trial and say you don't want to hear from a witness who had a direct conversation about the central allegation in the articles of impeachment. Because all of these senators on March 17th, when this book comes out, are going to be asked if they don't support calling him as a witness, why didn't you want to hear from him when he could have given you information before you rendered your verdict? And I just would not want to be in a position of having to answer that question.
Because, yeah, effectively, the GOP have set themselves up for getting
witness testimony
sued for violation of their oath. Because they've sworn twice oaths that they're breaking right now. So if they don't, like, turn around, they actually could lose the entire Senate and all of their positions in the House.
In our pre-buttal, that is, if they seek to contest any of the allegations here, then they are making the argument for additional witnesses. They're making the argument to call the people that we want to call. And I think the president's false tweets this morning are just a further false exculpatory. He said,
but yeah, they've basically set themselves up where
he said that
if they win,
claim that they had no meeting at the United Nations.
They can be sued for violation of their office.
Having a meeting at the United Nations. He claimed that
with removal being the primary condition.
Or something along the line is just patently false. When you have essentially the defendant making false statements, it's just further evidence of guilt. But at the end of the day, Allison, this is a test for these senators. They've taken an oath to be impartial. They just learned there's a key witness going to the heart of the allegations. The question they have to answer is, do they want to hear the truth? Do they want to cross-examine John Bolton? John Bolton, according to the president, is not telling the truth. Well, let's put John Bolton to the test. He's willing to do it. The question is, are the senators willing to hear the truth?
Let me read the tweet that you were referring to, because this is clearly on the president's mind this morning. So he tweeted, "The Democrat-controlled House never even asked John Bolton to testify. It is up to them, not up to the Senate!" Exclamation point. As you point out, that's not right. You did ask John Bolton to testify, but you didn't subpoena him. Do you now regret not subpoenaing John Bolton?
No, because we subpoenaed his deputy, and they're represented by the same lawyer, and the deputy sued us. And the counsel said, if you subpoena John Bolton, he'll sue you also. And basically, they would tie us up in court endlessly. When we did subpoena another witness, John McGann, we are still in court now 9 months later. So here's the situation, and this is, I think, the reason that John Bolton has offered to testify in the Senate. He's got a book coming out in March. He also does not want to be in the position of withholding this information until his book comes out. Now, that's not an excuse, frankly, for his failure to testify in the House. He should have come to the House. He should not have threatened to sue us if we subpoenaed him. There's no argument that he needed to go to court to get the court to adjudicate this when he has now acknowledged there's nothing classified in what he has to say, and he's put it all in the book. But nevertheless, he's offered to testify now. We're ready to hear his testimony. We'll be pushing again for his testimony, and I think all the senators are now really hard to turn him away.
But if the Senate, for whatever reason, decides not to subpoena John Bolton, will you subpoena him to appear before your House?
Time since the renegade Templars
I
faced a
don't want
mage
to
of
go
any
into
talent.
any kind of a backup plan, because the reality is the senators ought to hear this witness firsthand. They ought to evaluate his credibility. The president and his allies are obviously out there attacking him, saying this is not true. The question is, do we believe the president and his not under oath tweets, or are we going to believe John Bolton when he is under oath? And the senators should see that live. I think the American people should see his testimony live. What are they afraid of? Well, I think we know, because they had the manuscript, and now we see why they're desperately trying to prevent him from testifying. And President Trump's claim that the only reason he doesn't want John Bolton to testify, his earlier claim, was because he's protecting the office of the presidency for future presidents. We see now just how shallow and false that pious explanation was.
Have you had a chance to read this manuscript, by chance?
No, I didn't.
Will you now, today, try to get it from the publisher?
You know, what I think is more important than the manuscript, and I don't have an answer to that question right now, but are John Bolton's notes. And this is another theme that we've seen throughout the trial, and that is several key witnesses, Ambassador Taylor, George Kent, and others, took detailed notes. Mr. Morrison took detailed notes. Now we learn that John Bolton took detailed notes, and presumably these are contemporaneous. These notes took place while the events were happening, while they were fresh in his mind. Those, in many respects, are more important than the manuscript. So we ought to not only have John Bolton testify, but we ought to see what he wrote down in his notes at the time.
The president tweeted about you yesterday, and he said basically, quote, that you had not paid the price yet for all of this. You said you took that as a threat. What kind of threat?
Well, look, you know, I don't think you view this tweet in isolation. This is a president who accuses me of treason and has accused the whistleblower of treason. And so there are ways to treat people. We use that way of treating people as traitors and spies. I don't think there's really much doubt that he wants to at least give a suggestion that the retribution should be of a kind other than at the ballot box. This is, you know, the president's kind of organized crime speak, and that people would tolerate that or not condemn that in the president, you know, just shows how this president has brought down the stature of his office and debased the public discourse.
And just so I'm clear, you mean a threat to your personal safety?
I think it's intended to be personally threatening. I think that's exactly what the president has in mind. And, you know, the fact that he would even leave it ambiguous tells you that this is a president who, you know, has tried to intimidate witnesses and tried to discourage other people from coming forward, like the whistleblower. So, sadly, this is, you know, part and parcel of the kind of conduct we've seen from this president.
And Chairman Last, are you surprised to hear that the White House has had a copy of this manuscript since December 30th?
Well, I didn't know that they had, but no, it's not at all surprising because it explains why they are so terrified of having John Bolton testify and why they have had tried to raise all these hurdles through his testimony. But now the veneer has been torn off. The American people can see. The president is clearly trying to hide the truth here. The question is, will the senators participate and help the president, or will they demand to see the evidence, demand to hear the truth before they're asked to render a verdict? And I think that their oath requires them to do so.
One more thing. Are you surprised to read that John Bolton, or to hear that John Bolton is reportedly writing that Secretary of State Mike Pompeo knew that Rudy Giuliani's thoughts or schemes or conspiracy theories about Rudy Yovanovitch were not true?
No, that's not surprising at all. In fact, that's consistent with other testimony that the Secretary of State knew that this was bogus. Everyone in the State Department knew that the smear against Ambassador Yovanovitch, which Giuliani continues to this day, and the president as well, was completely false. But the Secretary wouldn't issue a statement supporting the ambassador because they would fear the president would undercut the Secretary or the Department with an angry tweet. And this is, you know, sadly what this administration has become. Fear of all the people who work in the administration, a lot of people outside the administration, of being on the receiving end of when the president's angry tweets. What I find remarkable about those tapes, those Carnage tapes that have been released in the last few days, is the President of the United States would order an ambassador fired based on the representation of, nothing more than the representation of one of his donors at a dinner. And that the president would operate this way and then make false statements about even knowing these people. Just shows what a continuing danger he poses in that office.
During time. That's why the Democrats are laying out the evidence against Trump on the Senate floor. Number 2, Rudy Giuliani launching a brand new podcast and web video series. Number 3, President Trump sitting down with Fox's Maria Bartiromo in Davos and congratulating her for signing a fat new contract. Number 4, Rudy Giuliani going on Judge Jeanine's show and promoting one of Fox's much smaller rivals, OANN. And last but not least, President Trump posting more than 330 times on Twitter in just the last 5 days. Lots and lots of retweets, including dozens of videos from Fox talk show segments. What do all these things have in common? They're all examples of the pro-Trump media universe operating in a really closed loop, downplaying or just totally denying Trump's wrongdoing while amplifying all the defenses. Back with me is John Avalon, Oliver Darcy, and Susan Glasser. However, you study this right-wing ecosystem for a living. It does seem that the wall's just getting, you know, stronger and stronger. So the Fox firewall is holding very strongly.
Yeah, and they're trying to inoculate their audience from the arguments from the Democrats, which the audience is not used to hearing, right? They're used to hearing Tucker Carlson, Sean Hannity give them the comfort food that they want. And so this week in primetime, you know, the one opportunity perhaps that the audience would see these arguments made by someone like Adam Schiff, they didn't get to see it because they were inoculated by the Fox audience in primetime.
Yeah, the afternoon hearings, trial coverage was shown live on Fox News, but then Fox was cut away. But I want to buy in the afternoon when they had the news anchors on, supposedly, right? They brought out Andrew McCarthy. They didn't bring on Justin Napolitano, the top journalist for years at Fox News, who happens to be very critical of the president's position, wrote this week that there's enough evidence to support his removal. They did not bring him on. They brought on Andy McCarthy, who was very sympathetic to Trump's case.
And if you look even further, Martha McCallum, for instance, this week, she's a top news anchor at Fox. She did a segment on Hunter Biden's attorney case instead of airing the Senate impeachment trial. Brett Baer had on this week Peter Schweitzer, who has pushed discredited theories about Hillary Clinton.
An interview with the GOP senator.
To any investigations, unquote. But take a listen to Acting White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney saying the president did exactly that.
He also mentioned to me in past that the corruption related to the DNC server. Absolutely, no question about that. But that's it. That's why we held up the money.
That is a quid pro quo. It is funding will not flow unless the investigation is a.
They're not responding, so the rift is kind of sealed at the moment.
Well. We do that all the time with foreign policy.
Does it bother you at all that the Trump legal team told you and your colleagues in the Senate that there's no evidence that the aid was linked to any investigation when the White House Chief of Staff has already admitted publicly that there was?
So the first thing you say is not linked to security assistance, and they definitely said that yesterday. And they detailed out how the White House did not connect this to security assistance.
He was talking about security assistance.
No, he was talking about the investigation in the 2016 into the CrowdStrike piece is what Mick Mulvaney was
right, and that the security assistance was tied to carrying out that investigation. There are two investigations Trump was calling for, too.
Right. Well, one of them he was calling for, one the President Zelensky asked him about, and that he actually brought up. But that's splitting hairs to the whole conversation here. In the process there, they also talked about in the phone call itself, the security assistance conversation was about Javelin, which were unconnected to this. And then the question is now this whole issue about 2016. Mm-hmm. Yes, they had a pause on that, and Mick Mulvaney clearly said that. And then I'm sure the White House team's going to walk through the next couple of days and be able to detail it.
But they already told you there's no evidence, and there is evidence. That's Mulvaney admitting that there was a link between the delay in the security assistance in exchange for the investigation into 2016.
Right. That's a link. But the 2016 is not about the 2020 election. I know this sounds bizarre on this for me. I've been confused the entire time with the House managers trying to say, if the president's asking Ukraine for additional information about the 2016 election, then that must be interfering in the 2020 election. It never made sense to me. They never tried to be able to connect the dots well on that. The 2016 election and all that debate had just ended literally the day before that call happened. On the 24th of July is when the Mueller report came out. It was final. Robert Mueller had done his statement to all of America through Congress to be able to read through all the report. It was closed. The next day, the president's on the phone with President Zelensky and says, do us a favor. Basically, my intelligence folks are saying one thing about Ukrainian interference in the election. Rudy Giuliani and some other folks are saying another thing about interference in it. Do us a favor. Is this true? Can you just check into it? Doesn't seem to be interfering in the 2016 election. That seems to be settling an issue that's still unsettled.
I think the argument is that the cloud of Russia helping President Trump in 2016 would be cleared theoretically if what Tom Bossert, the president's former Homeland Security advisor, has called a debunked conspiracy theory is proven correct. So it would theoretically help them in 2020 because it would clear this cloud if they could prove that Ukraine, not Russia, did it.
That's a pretty big line to be able to go, especially when something had already been put to bed.
But isn't that evidence?
That most definitely Russia was the one that was the primary factor in 2016. Right. The president still seems to have this question about whether it's Ukrainian. The server is taking Ukraine. I don't have a question on that. I don't think it's true on that. But he still does, and he's hearing information from two different sides. He wants to get it cleared up. That doesn't affect anything, though, in the 2020 election.
But it's evidence that there was a link between the delay in the security assistance and a demand for investigation. I'm saying which the Trump legal team argued does not exist, and we all saw it with our own eyes.
Okay, I will give you that, but I don't think that's a significant issue. Also, in that clip, what they're not playing are the other things that were said before that as well, that Mick Mulvaney was saying, here are all the other reasons. And yes, the president has talked about this as well. Sure, that had been part of the conversation.
And yes, that is hybrid lightning fire damage.
Right, and that was the biggest challenge that we had, is that for 3 days we heard one part of a sentence, but not the sentence before or the sentence after. And the president's legal team said, okay, let's take this sentence they've said is strong evidence, and let's put it into context what's before and after it. And you find out it's a whole different issue when you actually get it in context, like the whole issue about the White House visit. In that phone call, President Zelensky says, hey, we can't meet at the White House. Why don't we meet September the 1st? And that meeting gets set up. The process starts immediately on it and gets set up. But the House team is saying, if you don't get a White House visit, they don't want anything, that's all they want. Except in the same phone call, President Zelensky said, or we can meet over here, and they put that out.
I guess my only point is that's one of many examples of the president's team saying things that are not true. He also claimed, Pat Cipollini said, that House Republicans were not admitted into the skit for the depositions. I assume you've read at least some of the deposition transcriptions. Not only were Republicans in there, some of the president's most ardent defenders, Jim Jordan, Devin Nunes, Stefanik, Zeldin, were there asking questions. So when he said that, that wasn't true also.
No, what he's really trying to say there is there was no opportunity for the White House to cross-examine any of these individuals.
But that's not what he said.
Both in the first two times, and then when it came to the third time when they said the White House was actually invited, none of those folks actually came to be cross-examined. So the White House never had an opportunity to cross-examine any of these individuals.
All right, an attorney for Lev Parnas, a Giuliani associate who was indicted under federal campaign finance crimes in October, released nearly 90 minutes of the secret recording from a 2018 dinner with President Trump. Here's a quick clip.
How long have they lasted a fight with the election?
I don't think very long. Without us, not very long.
They go on to talk about the ouster of Ambassador Yovanovitch. When asked about Parnas, President Trump said, I don't know anything about him. This proves that that's not true.
Yeah, this is a fundraising dinner back in the spring of 2018, a year and a half ago, where the president literally takes a bunch of pictures. He walks in, sits down at dinner. It's a dinner of 25 people or so. They have dinner, and then he leaves. I don't see that as a
90-minute recording.
I understand that, but it's a dinner. It's 90 minutes over a dinner that he walks in and actually participates in it. It's hard to be able to say to the president, who meets 1,000 people a day, because you know this person that was at a dinner with you a year and a half ago, and to say you have a relationship. So again, it's the same argument people said, you had your picture made with them, and so that needs some problems.
It's a 90-minute conversation in which they call for the ouster of Yovanovitch when they talked about whether or not Ukraine could defend against Russia.
There's a lot of things. He talks about, in that same page, he's also talking about Germany not paying their fair share, and things there.
I think the president didn't tell because he lied. He said he didn't know who this guy was, and here's a 90-minute conversation.
So what I'm trying to say to you is the same thing you have. If I went back and said a year and a half ago, I want to ask you about somebody that attended a dinner you were at and was a part of a 20-person conversation. You could not name that person because you wouldn't remember him. Now, if they brought up a tape, you would go, okay, yeah, I was there. I just don't remember that person because it was a year and a half ago. You meet a lot of people. I meet a lot of people. Certainly the president meets a lot of people. And it's hard to be able to say, I know somebody that attended a fundraising dinner, got a picture made, or attended a different time and got a picture when you sure do meet a lot of people.
Okay, so I've established all but one of the camps. I keep somehow winding up going south. But yeah, so basically what's happening is Trump is trying to distance himself from the witnesses that can place him at the scene of the crime. He's trying to put the smoking gun on to the Bidens, when in reality, he'd been having his attorney do the things that he accuses Biden's son of doing.
Nothing to report, sir.
As a result, shit's been happening.
Word for you.
What is it?
You may want to look into this.
Remember to, when I get the chance, hang a left. Okay, we're about an hour and 15 minutes away from impeachment going live. Yeah, this is a weird time we live in, yeah? Let's go ahead and see what SNL had to say.
It's Weekend Update with Colin Jost and Michael Shea.
weekend update on Michael Cole. I'm Colin Joe. Guys, the impeachment trial started this week. Am I crazy, or was Adam Schiff on my television for 100 hours straight? Even when I turned the TV off, there was still an outline of him burned into the screen. What happened was Democrats spent 3 days laying out in great detail how they believe President Trump has been the most egregious abuser of power in American history. And then Republicans laid out their defense, the struggle. Mitch McConnell, seen here calmly watching an orphanage burn.
What's this?
Mitch McConnell defended his plan for the trial, saying the country is waiting to see if we can rise to the occasion. I would maybe say you're not rising to the occasion, considering one senator fell asleep, Rand Paul was doing a crossword puzzle, and some Republican senators even brought fidget spinners to play with. I assume this symbolized how the founding fathers are spinning in their graves.
You're better than me, Carl. I didn't watch 1 minute of that trial. It was like a 4-day-long PowerPoint. This is supposed to be Trump's punishment, not mine. This whole impeachment is like a bad episode of Maury. There's all this evidence that Trump clearly cheated, and Republicans are still like, but Maury, he loved me. Trump is so confident he's going to win, he's using Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer to represent him. Talk about
that triggers Inquisition perks, by the way. Every single time you do one of those, you get an Inquisition perk from that.
Lindsey Graham said that President Trump was bored by the whole impeachment trial, which isn't a surprise since Trump typically loses focus halfway through his own sentence. For example, here he is this week talking about Elon Musk.
He's also doing the rockets. He likes rockets. And he does good at rockets, too, by the way. And I was worried about him because he's one of our great geniuses, and we have to protect our genius. You know, we have to protect Thomas Edison.
We have to protect Thomas Edison? I think that's a line Nick Cage yells in National Treasure. Joe Biden then rejected the idea of testifying in the impeachment trial, saying, I want no part of that, while his son Hunter Biden said, wait, how much does it pay?
I mean, maybe I'm paranoid, but I'm starting to think Democrats actually want Trump to stay in office. Because every time he does something crazy and racist, they're like, oh, no, don't do that. I mean, you're telling me the United States government can't figure out how to remove a crazy dictator? We've been practicing all over the world for like 100 years. We're kind of famous for it. That'd be like if Jamaica forgot how to unwind.
And now we're reporting a service of President Trump telling adult Cabbage Patch doll Lev Parnas that he wanted the former ambassador to Ukraine fired. Here is the audio.
Get rid of her, right? Get her out tomorrow. I don't care. Get her out tomorrow. Take her out. Okay?
Take her out. I would maybe choose your words more carefully when you're talking to someone who looks like a professional car bomber.
Yeah,
also, how is a random person able to secretly record the president on his phone? I mean, they take away your phone if you go to see Dave Chappelle do stand-up. And speaking of recordings, Rudy Giuliani on Friday launched a podcast called Rudy Giuliani Common Sense, in which he offers his defense of President Trump. It's the first podcast ever recorded and uploaded accidentally from a chance pocket. The title of the first episode is a story that, since no crimes exist, it must be dismissed. And according to reviewers, Rudy was once highly regarded, but now seems mildly repressed.
Also, that is temporarily immune to damage. That's interesting. I knew all my NPCs were going to be getting new abilities and stuff, including the bad guys. Damn.
Have you heard from any of your Kirkwell associates, Derek?
You're asking me? So you don't read my letters?
You're no longer my prisoner, much as you like to act like it.
Yet I still get all the suspicion.
I am not without sympathy, especially given recent events.
Why, Seeker, I would never accuse you of having sympathy. By the way, I tend to refer to my associates as friends. Maybe you're not familiar with the concept.